Hey there, everyone. I am Aaron St. Dennis, the Mad Scientist, and welcome to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Welcome back. Today we're continuing the My Thoughts on My Team series, and for the first time in about 4 episodes, I actually have someone who likes the fucking team. So today it's my thoughts on the New England Patriots with Mike Faiella. Welcome, Mike. I'm glad to have a fan.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. How you doing?
Not too bad. Been a long day. You are 15th out of 16 today. I've been recording since 9 o'clock in the morning. It is now just about 9 p.m.
Man, I was going to complain about being on the radio till midnight, but you got me beat. So,
Thanks for joining me. You want to tell everyone where they can find your work?
sure. I am at DLF as usually a strategy writer for Dynasty leagues, and I am at Trophy Smack during the season writing a sleeper article weekly.
All right, that's good to know. So I guess without further ado, let's see if I can transition myself here nicely with the graphics. There we go. Just like I know what I'm doing. All right, we have a quarterback room that should be relatively stable, but last year all bets were off. So ESPN has Mac Jones as the starter with Bailey Zappi as the backup. The Patriots didn't draft anyone, so that's kind of a show of good faith there, a good sign for Mac Jones. Do you think he finishes the season as the starter, or does he lose the job to Bailey Zappi again?
No, he finishes as the starter with Patricia out of town and Bill O'Brien coming in. They're going to get right. I think the experiment last year is something we have to just kind of write off as a huge mistake by the coaching staff. And we're going to get back to Mac Jones being that kind of stable QB2 that we were used to from his rookie year.
I think he's actually good. Like that's I traded for him in a few leagues last year, and sure enough, the very next game is what was it, a Monday Night Football where he lost his job to Bailey Zappi, and I'm going, well, shit, I might as well have just lit all those picks on fire that I traded for him. But I think he's good. I think he's probably a mid to high end QB2 as his ceiling, but he's in a super flex league. He's definitely a competent QB2 for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're looking at that range, I still have Mac Jones over like a Kenny Pickett, for example. So he'll fall into that like QB 16 range, which honestly, if you're stacking your team early on and you have a good QB1, you can get worse than Mac Jones. And I will tell you that, he is for those who play in the Scott Fish Bowl, an absolute star for leagues like that. His efficiency is through the roof, and will only get better with Bill O'Brien. So he's a guy you can nab and just avoid those negative points and scoring systems like that.
As long as he doesn't throw 3 passes on a Monday Night Football.
Well, it's still better than throwing an interception in that scoring league. So
True, very true. Now we'll move on to running backs are us. They ship out Damian Harris and still somehow find 5 running backs on this team. Ramondre should be the unquestioned starter. Despite the fact that they had 2 rookies last year that I thought, coming into their careers, I thought Strong and Kevin Harris had some upside to them. Still, they go out and they sign James Robinson, and Ty Montgomery is in there just for kicks, I guess. I can't see any of them challenging Ramondre, but the way Belichick works things, I don't know what to make of this. Well, what's your thoughts?
I think in reality, I mean, you talked about it. Ramondre is the starter. I think where it gets a little bit interesting is between Pierre Strong and Ty Montgomery. When you're talking about that receiving back role, that historic role the Patriots have used previously, like a Kevin Falk type role, where they're not the starter, but in PPR you could snag those 8 to 10 points.
James White.
James White was playing that role after that. They always have that in place. It will not be Kevin Harris. He's more of a pounder. And James Robinson's overhyped. I mean, they gave him nothing for money, so I'm not even sure he makes the team. But what you really want to watch through camp is Pierre Strong versus Ty Montgomery for that third down back role. That could have some playable weeks. It'd be frustrating as hell, as the Patriots always are. But I think you can get at least a couple playable weeks out of that specific position.
Yeah, that scared me because Stevenson had a ton of hype coming in. Damian Harris is gone. It's his backfield. But the Senior Bowl, the Combine, every pro day you've seen, the Patriots always wanted to work with the pass catching backs. And that's exactly what you're talking about there. So I think Strong might, if he were to win that role over Montgomery's got to be 30 by now, right? You think?
He is, yeah. And when he played 2 games, but I'll tell you, the games he played, I want to say he had a game with like 11 targets last year. People forget because he
Good
got hurt,
God.
but yeah, they gave him the ball. That position is not
Wow.
a nothing spot, even in
No,
a
no.
crowded backfield. It's a big spot, so it's something
Yeah.
you want to watch, especially for those zero
No.
RB guys. It's huge.
I understand it. Like I said, I had James White till he was literally 6 feet under, and I was still keeping him in hopes that he would get back on the field because that's the Belichick way. They will just find they've got their early down bruiser, and then they've got their pass catching specialist who's just going to vulture short touchdowns and tons of targets. So that's one I'm going to monitor: Pierre Strong or Ty Montgomery, whichever of them wins that job. I think they could prove like sneaky value, especially like you said in a Scott Fish Bowl when you're down to round 22 and it's a bunch of nobodies you've never ever that nobody's ever heard of. Fuck it, let's take Pierre Strong or Ty Montgomery. Moving on to the wide receiver room, which is kind of a collection of misfit toys here. They've got Juju Smith-Schuster, which they gave him the same contract as Jacoby Myers, essentially, right?
Yeah, that was, in my opinion, a big mistake.
Well,
He's
that
the
was going to
worst
be my
player.
question. For the same money, I would have vastly preferred Myers. I assume you agree?
100%. Yeah, I think Jacoby Myers is a much better player, and he's proven he could do it in this offense, in this system. So I don't know why they moved on to Juju for Jacoby Myers, but I've learned not to try to dig too deep into the mind of Belichick. You're not going to figure it out. So
Yeah, I know this isn't a huge pass volume offense, and there's a lot of potential down here, but like Bourne, you never know what to get out of him. Parker's way past his prime. Tyquan Thornton is essentially just a speed guy. Demario Douglas was really low ranked for me. I don't know much about him. Keishawn Butte was a guy I really loved coming into this year, but I think I did a late round lottery ticket article for DLF that I was just submitting as we started this, and Butte was my 6th round late round lottery ticket. I know he's had work ethic, character concerns, injury concerns, and he just tanked after his freshman year. But I think if Bill Belichick can, get him through this, I think he could be a productive receiver there, even though it's a low pass volume offense.
sure. I mean, if he can get into that spot, he's going to have a few games where he's going to put up points. I do think, though, the guy to watch for is Kendrick Bourne. I said this last year and couldn't have been more wrong. However, you really got to dig into the why in that situation. And Kendrick Bourne was late for an offensive meeting and ended up in Matt Patricia's doghouse. It was one of the weirdest things that we were wrestling with up here in
Patricia's
Boston.
an idiot.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
I live in Windsor, right across from Detroit, and God, all they do on the radio for the entire time was here. God, he's a moron.
Oh,
For
it's
a,
terrible.
for a rocket scientist, he's the dumbest person I've ever seen.
Absolutely. And what he did was he took what was the most talented receiver on this football team and put him in the doghouse for one infraction. I'm hoping that Bill O'Brien reconciles that. I'm hoping that we see Kendrick Bourne in the games. And if we do, he's going to be your upside play. I mean, he's a guy who was putting up numbers. If you remember at the end of
Yeah.
2021, he had a couple big games, came in with 800 yards and 5 touchdowns, 70 targets. Not a nothing there as well. So realistically, you're going to have some Devontae Parker while he's healthy. Obviously, he'll still go up and get the ball. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be your safest bet. Butte or Kendrick Bourne, one of those is going to rise up by the end of the season and be a wide receiver 3.
I didn't know that about Bourne, though. I knew they gave him a fairly decent deal. What was it, 2 years ago?
Mhm.
And then he just disappeared. That's unbelievable if that was just a Matt Patricia spite doghouse. That's ridiculous. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you're talking about a 27-year-old, really big-time player. Even if he was with the 49ers,
Yeah,
the
he was
talent
good.
was always there. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
the injuries. So I'm hoping they get him back to good. He's always been a good teammate. All his teammates backed him through the whole situation. So with Patricia moving on, thankfully, I think you might have a really good late-round dart throw there in Kendrick Bourne.
Moving on to tight end here, we have Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. Gesicki listed as the starter. He was a puzzling one for me. He's not normally, or he's not the type of tight end that the Patriots typically go for. Hunter Henry, it was Jonnu Smith before.
Mhm.
I find that to be the more big, tough blocker, red zone threat. Gesicki's a glorified slot receiver, basically. I don't quite understand the fit. What do you think of these two?
I am always been a big detractor of Mike Gesicki. Anyone who follows me knows he's just one of those players I can't get behind. Doesn't block, is
No,
really a tight end name only. Can't break a tackle. It's
no.
just not a player that I like having on this team. So I'm still going to lean towards Hunter Henry, who's a complete tight end and really was a good red zone target for Mac Jones 2 years ago. Again, if we write off last year, I still think Hunter Henry rises to the top out of these two tight ends for fantasy. And I think Gesicki ultimately is going to frustrate Bill Belichick, and he's going to have some games where he's not seeing the field as much as we would expect, especially given the fact that they just brought in Juju Smith-Schuster, who's operating primarily out of the slot. It
Yeah.
makes no sense to have two guys that are very similar kind of mass slot receivers. But, this build is strange, but I would tend to lean Hunter Henry. I was hoping with Jonnu leaving, Henry would have the job to himself, but in this case, really both of them are one of those like late tight end two dart throws.
I have a creators league where I co-manage with another content creator, and this our roster kind of looks like this, where it looks like two different people drafted the damn team, where it's like two different managers going in completely different directions, where
Mm-hmm.
they don't know what their identity is. I always see them as a run first team, but then like the Mike Gesicki, I just don't understand it. Juju over Jacoby Myers, I don't understand it. They have some really good pieces. And then to add James Robinson, I guess who was free, but they'll probably cut him. I just some of the moves. It's like you ship out Damian Harris, and then it's let's add Ty Montgomery, let's add James Robinson or whatever. They're confusing. I don't understand what they're doing some of the time.
So the good thing is that by the time we get to September kickoff, some of these guys will not be on the team.
Yeah,
Belichick is very much, if you're not cutting what he wants, you're not making the team. And that really applies to pretty much everybody on this list outside of the top two with Mac Jones and
yeah,
Ramondre Stevenson. It's
yeah,
hard to believe that, any of them aren't at least feeling a little nervous going in. So it'll be interesting to see the way this shakes out. But with the tight end position, I just have to think Gesicki was more of a strategic move, taking him from a division rival who honestly gave every indication they don't want him. So I'm not sure why you would do that.
yeah.
But
I don't know.
there's no real logic to the move at all. But that's where we landed. So here we are.
Yeah. All right. I know it's a little early for ADP, especially for redraft. I typically lean towards best ball this time of year, just based on where you think the players are likely to be drafted. Who's a guy on this team you're likely to target that you might have on a lot of your teams at cost?
At cost, it's a real tough one because I want to say Ramondre, but I have to think the boost he just got coming out of the NFL draft may put him in a stratosphere that I'm not comfortable with.
Yep.
I'd like him as my running back too, but I think some people are really kind of overvaluing him. So I guess at cost, given the wasteland of the position, I'd probably lean Hunter Henry because I know I could get him for basically free. And that position where you're streaming a lot anyway, he's probably the guy that I would target as someone who's going to end up overperforming his ADP. I think people are going to
Yeah.
overrate the Mike Gesicki signing.
For me, it's Mac Jones. I don't see him going like he's normally 20 something off the board is for quarterbacks. And I think he's a perfectly, trustworthy QB2 in a super flex. So
Mm-hmm.
I think any super flex, I'm going to have a few shares of him. I don't mind a Pierre Strong in a deep format as a dart throw. Keishawn Butte, I think I have him on a couple of taxi squads just as a hope and a prayer that maybe Belichick squares him, gets him on the straight and narrow, and the talent reemerges. But it's kind of a tough one. How about the other way? How about an avoid?
Juju, I am.
That's good.
Yeah.
You answered that really quickly.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
I think people are looking at this and saying this is a wide receiver one. There isn't one, and you're gonna end up getting frustrated when you look at Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, and Kendrick Bourne. I'm going to go with the cheapest of that triumvirate, and it's probably
Absolutely.
going to be Kendrick Bourne. And there are going to be weeks when each of them are the wide receiver one. Hell, there's going to be weeks when Ty Montgomery is the wide receiver one, and we'll never know why. But Juju Smith-Schuster is, just by name, is going to go higher than he should. He has throughout his whole career, so I'm a full avoid on him.
That's the other one. Based on the way you've talked, I might be targeting Bourne in more leagues than I would have, coming into this podcast here. I didn't really know that about him. I just thought he was another disposable receiver, but excuse me, he might be someone I'm taking a look at late in drafts. Our final one here, if you had to pick one sleeper, who do you think it would be? It's tough. They don't really have a sleeper.
They don't, and I think it would be Pierre Strong.
Yeah.
I think he's the guy that really, you're going to see a lot of drafts where he's not even taken, where people are just assuming James Robinson's the 2. So I always hate when people are like, oh, give me a sleeper. And they're like, well, I'll take their wide receiver too. Come on now. Let's not be silly. You're talking about, I have $1 left to bid in my auction draft. It's Pierre Strong, because if he takes that role, there's a lot of upside for this kid. And if anything were to happen to Ramondre Stevenson, we saw what a Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris split would look like at the end of the year when they started giving the kids some run, and Strong is getting the receiving work. And that's what we care about in PPR. So that's really my deep sleeper. But again, 3. I'm not advocating for a high draft pick if you're doing a draft or a big bid in auction, but a $1 bid. Yeah, why not throw it on Pierre Strong instead of someone sucks?
Yeah, Pierre Strong, I would say, would be my waiver wire sleeper pickup. Bourne, I think, is going to be my last or late round flyer pickup. And I know it's not probably not going to qualify as a sleeper, but I think Mac Jones could be qualify. He's going nowhere near the top end of the quarterbacks. He's outside of the, what is he? Last I checked, he was like QB 26 or something in ADP. So.
Yeah, I want to see how that corrects over the next 2 months, with the rumors of the Patriots maybe taking Levis if he's there, with the rumors of Mac Jones maybe getting moved.
I think it corrects now?
I think it should. I think in reality, and I'll be with you, if Mac Jones is going quarterback 26 and I have him quarterback 16, that's a smash. He'll be on every one of my teams. But I have to think that now he's entrenched as the starter. I think that'll course correct. Now, if people are still afraid of Zappy, absolutely, I'd be snatching him up everywhere.
So last year, I have them 9th in the AFC at 8-9. Where do you think they finish in the division? And do they go over, under, or the same with 8 wins?
Oh, so I think if we take a look at the division right now, I have them 3rd. And it's funny because the one team that I can never get behind is the Miami Dolphins. I just don't see it with that team. They find a way to fall off. So I'm going Bills, Jets, Pats, Dolphins in that order when you look at the AFC East. And I'm going to give them one more win, and we're going to go 9-8 with this team and just missing out on the playoffs this year. I think their defense got better. They picked up a lot of athletes on the defensive side of the ball, which is what they were missing. So they were only a few points from being in that 9-8 role, and I think they can fix that this year. I like what they just did in the draft. They made some high-level picks that I really enjoyed seeing, and I think getting Bill O'Brien back was a huge get to turn this team around. So you're talking about they were a dysfunctional 8-9 and only got better. So give me 9-8 and just miss on the playoffs. They're in the AFC East.
Yeah, I'm going either 8-9 or 9-8. They're tough. I could see them as high as 2nd. I'm not going to put them above Buffalo. I could see them as high as 2nd or as low as 4th. The Jets and the Dolphins, the Patriots, all 3 of them have question marks. They could all be good. They could all just be terrible. So it's a tough one for me, but I think they hover right around 500 one way or another.
That's fair.
All right, Mike, thanks for joining me. Excuse me, got tongue-tied here. Been doing this too long. Thanks for joining me. You want to take one more chance here to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, Mike Faiella at Daddy's Home FF on Twitter. Check out my writing in the offseason at DLF and during the season at Trophy Smack Zone.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. This has been my thoughts on the New England Patriots with Mike Faiella. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Check back tomorrow for whoever the next analyst is with the next team. Once again, Mike, thanks for joining me. This has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Have a good night, everyone.